Hey everyone, so you have returned to the channel. We're going to explore the critical, tragic shift from first contact to outright conquest by the Spanish, and the brutal system that sealed the fate of the island's indigenous people. Most of us know that Christopher Columbus was the first European to land in Jamaica. Some of our viewers may still be a bit confused, and I am here to clear that up. First, let's recap a bit. Columbus' arrival wasn't the start of the real tragedy. That came later. Let's set the scene. Christopher Columbus's first voyage led him to Hispaniola in 1492, to what we now know as the Dominican Republic. In May 1494, during his second voyage, Columbus sailed into what the native Taíno people called Jamaica, the land of wood and water. He claimed it for Spain, planted a flag, and then sailed away. For a few years, life for the Taíno went on, perhaps with a lingering sense of unease. But the Spanish weren't gone for good. In 1503, during his final disastrous voyage, Columbus found himself shipwrecked. His worm-eaten ships beached in St. Anne's Bay on Jamaica's north coast. He and his crew were stranded for a whole year. We mentioned much of what took place in the last video, so we won't cover all of that here. However, the Spanish sailors became demanding and abusive, taking what they wanted by force. Christopher Columbus had changed by the time he returned to Spain. The Spanish crown's ambitions were now heightened, fueled by the elaborate letters he had sent, which were filled with promises of gold. And though the voyages themselves were not yet profitable, greed dictated that a new, more ruthless approach was needed to secure the wealth they believed was there. But this was still just the prelude. The real, systematic colonization of Jamaica didn't begin until 1509. By this time, Christopher Columbus was dead, and his son, Diego Columbus, was the governor of the Indies. He sent a man named Juan de Esquivel to formally occupy the island and establish a permanent settlement. Esquivel landed and founded the first Spanish capital on the north coast, naming it Sevilla la Nueva, or New Sevilla. Now, the Spanish had hoped to find gold in Jamaica, just as they had in Hispaniola and other territories. But they were disappointed. Jamaica had no significant gold reserves. So, what was its value to the Spanish Empire? The answer was its strategic location and its incredibly fertile land. The Crown decided to turn Jamaica into a giant supply base, a massive farm and ranch to provide food, leather, and other provisions for the treasure fleets and conquering expeditions heading to the mainland of the Americas. This agricultural focus meant the most valuable resource on the island wasn't a mineral, but the people themselves. The Taíno, and to exploit this human resource, the Spanish introduced a system that would become infamous throughout the Americas to Encomienda. On paper, the Encomienda System was presented by the Spanish Crown as a relatively benign institution. It was framed as a trust. A Spanish settler, called an encomendero, would be entrusted with a group of native people. In exchange for their labor, the encomendero was legally obligated to protect them, provide for their well-being, and, most importantly, instruct them in the Catholic faith. It was pitched as a civilizing mission, a way to bring salvation to the indigenous population. But the reality was a world away from this official narrative. In practice, the Encomienda System was nothing more than a thinly veiled form of slavery. The promise of protection and Christian instruction was almost always ignored. Instead, the Taíno were forced into brutal, unrelenting labor. They were rounded up and put to work on vast farms, called hatos, raising cattle and pigs. They were forced to cultivate cassava, a staple crop used to make bread for the Spanish expeditions. They were also put to work building the new Spanish settlements, churches, and fortifications. The conditions were horrific. The encomenderos pushed the Taíno to their absolute limits, demanding grueling labor from dawn until dusk with little food or rest. They were also required to pay tribute, often in the form of cotton or food, which left them with even less for themselves. Any resistance was met with swift and violent punishment. Families were torn apart, with men sent to work in one part of the island, while women and children were forced into domestic servitude in Spanish households. The combination of this relentless forced labor, malnutrition, and the introduction of European diseases like smallpox and measles, to which the Taíno had no immunity, created a demographic catastrophe. The population, which might have been as high as 60,000 to 100,000 at the time of contact, plummeted. Within just a few decades, the indigenous people of Jamaica were pushed to the brink of extinction. The land of wood and water had become a land of suffering and death. The Spanish themselves documented this decline. The initial grants of Encomienda gave settlers hundreds of Taíno laborers. But just a few years later, those numbers had dwindled so drastically that Encomendaras were complaining they didn't have enough people to work the land. The system was literally working its victims to death. The civilizing mission was, in truth, a mission of exploitation that consumed the very people it was supposed to save. This period, from 1509 onwards, marks the true beginning of Jamaica's colonial tragedy. It wasn't a quick, violent conquest in the traditional sense, with major battles. It was a slow, grinding process of attrition, driven by greed and institutionalized through the Encomienda System. The search for wealth had shifted from gold to the human body itself, turning people into disposable tools for building the foundation of a new empire. The legacy of this era is profound. The near totala annihilation of the Taíno people in Jamaica is a stark reminder of the devastating human costs of colonization. The very name of the island, Jamaica, is one of the few tangible legacies of its original inhabitants that survives to this day. When we think of Jamaican history, it's crucial to remember this foundational Sapara story, not of discovery, but of subjugation, and a system that turned a paradise into a labor camp. With the Taíno population gone, the Spanish turned their eyes across the Atlantic to Africa. To replace the vanished indigenous workforce, they began the horrific practice of importing enslaved Africans. This decision marked a pivotal and tragic turning point. It inaugurated the next dark chapter in Jamaican history, the era of the transatlantic slave trade and plantation slavery. The legacy of the Encomienda is therefore twofold. It represents the near total annihilation of Jamaica's indigenous Taíno people, a cultural and human loss that is immeasurable, and it set the stage for the centuries of African enslavement that would follow, fundamentally reshaping the island's demography, culture, and history forever. The echoes of these events from 500 years ago still resonate today, a somber reminder of the brutal foundations upon which so much of the New World was built. It's a heavy topic, I know, but it's a crucial part of understanding the complex history of Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. History isn't always heroic or uplifting, but it is vital that we confront its darkest chapters to understand how our world came to be. If you found this video informative and want to explore more hidden histories with me, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us continue to make this content. Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next video.